Hi, welcome to this episode of the See Jane Build podcast, where I will be talking about talking. To be specific, I'll be talking about talking to professionals that you want to work with on your remodel or build, namely architects and contractors. Hopefully, you have listened to the previous podcast episodes, dug deep into how your home needs to work and feel, generated a creative brief, and are now ready to move forward and make it happen. Or, of course, maybe you are still in the thinking and dreaming stages and just listening to the episodes to learn, and you aren't sure when you'll start your project. Either way, at some point, if you are building or renovating, you're going to need to hire and work with experts who can make the project happen. I've talked about 3 phases of any project: dream, design and define, and do. Today, we're talking about how to move from dream into those next phases. Some of you have likely spent a lot of time thinking about what you want and need in your house, especially if you've been living there for years already and you know what works and what doesn't. Other times, the dreaming stage is much shorter because you've bought a new house that needs a renovation before you can even move in. In either case, I hope that you have generated some type of document, ideally the creative brief, about what you want and need to guide you and those you want to hire. Now it's time to share that brief and move on to the next step, which can feel terrifying. It's kind of like sending your baby out into the world and can be so nerve-wracking. You might be worried that people are going to laugh at your ideas for your house and think you're wrong for wanting what you want and needing what you need. Or you may be thinking that they immediately will know you really don't know what you're talking about when it comes to renovating, and so they will try to take advantage of you. Though hopefully See Jane Build will alleviate some of this stress. Likely a part of you is worried that if you tell people your budget and are honest about it, they will automatically use that number as the minimum they will charge. And of course, you're wondering how you will know if you can trust what people are saying to you. Architects and builders can appear to be dream makers or dream crushers. One thing for sure is we tend to grant them a whole lot of power. We come to them frequently nervous and intimidated and say, "Here's my dream home, please make it happen." Quick aside, for those of you listening from the start, you know I don't like the term dream home one iota. Unless you are made of money, and sometimes even then, any home requires some compromise. Plus, once you finish the home, there are almost always things you would tweak, especially as your life evolves. But that doesn't mean that the home you're working on isn't your dream or a dream home. It just may not be the dream for forever. For the most part, an architect or designer will be the first professional you engage in a major way to help design and define your project. Ideally, you will find one through a referral from a friend or family member or fellow mom at the playground or in the carpool lane at school. But there are a number of websites like Houzz and Angie that list local professionals, and local listservs like Nextdoor are a good resource as well. Hopefully, you'll find 2 to 3 that you'd like to reach out to. Look at their websites. Do you like the style? Is it all the same style? If so, and that doesn't match your style, chances are they will not be a good fit because clearly they have a type. But if some of their work is your style, or if the images on their site represent a whole wide variety of styles, even if you're not sure if yours is represented in the photos, then reach out for a meeting/interview. Almost always, this meeting will happen at your house, since it is your house that needs the designing. They will want to see your space and likely ask a lot of questions about what you want. One way to tell if you are even remotely on the same page is the reaction to your creative brief, which of course you should give them at that first meeting. If you're talking with a prospective architect and you hand them your brief, how do they react? Are they thrilled you're giving them so much detail? Or do they dismiss it because after seeing your house, they already have their vision for it? And yes, I did use air quotes there, even though you can't see it, because you all know what I mean about those architects that think their vision trumps everything. A good architect or designer will really digest what you tell them about your needs and wants for this space, and then they will take that and add on from their expertise. For example, if you're doing a remodel and want to make sure the common spaces are great for entertaining because you love to host, you want them to suggest layouts that maximize this priority. You want them to say something like, "Hey, If we move the room configurations from what they are now to this, you will have better flow from kitchen to living room, or easier access to outside, or even something as simple and practical as, you should really squeeze in a half bath right here so that when you have guests, they don't need to go into the bathrooms that are way down the hall and that you and your family use every day. Or, hey, let's squeeze in a second dishwasher here because you entertain so much. Architects provide the strategy, the plan for the execution of your needs, not of their vision. A big red flag is if they don't ask you about your budget. This is not like a salary negotiation for a job. You need to be prepared to talk openly, honestly, and often about the money you have to spend on the project. And you need to be clear that this is the amount total for the project. Architect, contractor, and landscaping, fixtures, finishes, etc. Everything. Both architects and contractors need this transparency. But it's also good to remember that an architect can draw a set of plans that could cost different amounts to build depending on your choices. For example, an architect draws a kitchen plan and includes cabinets. The plan is basically the same, but if you use IKEA cabinets versus custom-built cabinets, the price to build will be quite different. I got super lucky the first time I worked with an architect because I didn't know really what questions to ask, and it could have gone sideways or upside down. Thank goodness it didn't. Because you want to make sure that you do ask a lot of questions, and you want to make sure to understand the following. What is their process? How do they work, and how are you involved? How do they communicate with you? How do they see working with you in the design stage where they're paramount, and also then when you move into the build stage? How do they do timelines, and what do they see as the timeline for your project in terms of the design piece of it? Obviously, an architect cannot speak to the build side. How do they help you manage your budget? Depending on how they want to price things, how many back and forths can you have about tweaking the design without causing extra fees to incur? All of the above should be talked about and be explicit in their written proposal to you. An architect or designer, as discussed, will be the one who takes your ideas and creates the plan, the design and define. But oftentimes, depending on the size and scope of the project, they may also have a role in the do phase once the contractor is actually building. Sometimes this is as simple and low-key as being involved as needed at an hourly rate when issues or questions arise. Other times, it's as a project manager, where they are the liaison between you and the contractor, and they are doing regular site visits and meetings and keeping things on track. These are two very different roles and have very different price tags, and you'll also have to figure out which one makes sense for you. When we did our North Fork build, we looked at 3 contractors, and our architect was really honest with us that one of those contractors, we would probably need him, the architect, to be very involved because of how that architect worked. The other contractor, our architect said, you know what, if you hire him, you don't even need me in that stage, just, as needed on an hourly basis. And we really appreciated that honesty. You should not assume anything about the role of your architect, especially during the build stage. Clarify from the get-go how they will be involved, how that will be charged for, what happens if you require more of their time, etc. Try and see, can you drive around with a prospective architect to see some of the work they have done? Even if you can't go inside the houses, it's a chance to talk about homes that aren't yours, what they have done there, and what you want in your house and how those kind of things compare. Not only will this provide a real-life glimpse of their work, but it will also give you a little window of how talking, and thus working, with them might go. Basically, is there any good working chemistry there, so to speak? When we built our North Fork home, we went driving around to maybe 5 houses with the architect we ultimately chose. Funny story, one of them was a house on a property that was a working farm, and where we loved to buy berries from their farm stand. In fact, we referred to that farm stand as the Berry Man, after the patriarch of the family that ran the farm. Once, when the Berry Man himself was working at the stand, and mind you, he was probably around 80, 85 years old, we commented about using the same architect. So all of a sudden he pulls out this huge stack of photos of his house build to show us and literally makes us go through each photo. I guess he just kept the photos there all the time in case anyone asked about his house, which I will point out is not even remotely visible from where the farm stand is. In addition to driving around and seeing their work, you also want to, of course, ask for a couple of references. Like with anything, though, no one is going to offer up someone as a reference who is going to say, "Oh, that woman was awful to work with." So ask as much about process. How were they to work with? Were there any issues and how were they resolved? Were they on time, on budget? What was their role once you got to the build phase and how did that work out? Try to get to as much as you can about how they operate because that's all you're really going to get from a reference. If you're coming at this hiring process, the whole process really, as a really informed and educated and prepared consumer, the more rewarding and collaborative the process will be, and the less you'll feel like someone is trying to get one over on you, or that the relationship needs to be a zero-sum game. When it's time to move on to the do stage, and you're looking for a contractor, the more you have nailed down when working with an architect, or the more detailed your brief is if it's a project that doesn't need an architect, the more accurate any proposal can be. If you have made all the major, if not minor as well, decisions already, for example, like what kind of kitchen cabinets, as mentioned before, the builders can bid using those specifics versus having a line item for a cabinet allowance, leaving less to chance and less opportunity for budget surprises. If your architect doesn't ask you about this kind of thing once you were in the thick of it, speak up and insist it be included. When you're vetting architects, make sure you are asking how they factor your budget and decisions about things like cabinets into their process. Most architects will have some contractors they will recommend to you for your project. While you don't, of course, have to hire someone referred by your architect, it's always a bonus if your architect and contractor have worked together successfully before. And just like when you were looking for an architect, ask friends, coworkers, etc. if they have contractors they would recommend. And again, try to find 2 or 3 to talk to. I'm going to repeat myself here because I think it is that important. Before getting formal bids from contractors, I highly recommend having both the major and minor decisions made, at least as many as possible. So not just the cabinets, like I mentioned above, but even things like where the towel bars are going to hang and where the light switches will be. Don't worry, you don't need the towel bars in hand yet, though bonus points if you have at least selected them. But the more detailed you are about everything the contractor needs to touch, the easier it will be for a contractor to give you not just a proposal, but a proposal that really truly has real and accurate numbers in it. A contractor looks at the drawings, talks to their subcontractors, and gives you a bid on what it will cost to build what is on the plans. When something is not specified on the plans, one of 3 things can happen. 1, for something standard like kitchen or bathroom cabinets or flooring, something all houses will have and that will be on a plan in some format, just not necessarily spelled out, a contractor may put an allowance line in the bid. For other things, like niche shelves and showers, towel bars, recessed lights, these things, if they are not on the plan, do not make it into the proposal. And when things aren't on a proposal and you need to add them in later, that is considered a change order, and there is usually a surcharge for every change order. That can add up quickly if you are not careful. So the more you know about what will go in your house and where, the more you can know about what the cost will be to actually build it. A contractor can't make up quotes. They can't guess what you want. If it's not on the plans, it's not in the proposal. A lot of the vetting process for a contractor is the same as it would be for an architect. What is their process? How do they manage their projects? Will they assign a project lead, or are they themselves the lead? How do they communicate on a regular basis with you, both in person and otherwise, to give you updates on the build progress and resolve any issues? How often will they check in with you? How will they check in with you? How do they do their timelines, and what do they see as the timeline for your project? How will they help manage your budget? How are inspections handled? How are purchases handled? Go and see some of their projects. Ideally, get them to show you one in progress too, so you can see what their job sites look like and get a feel for the vibe. Talk to references, of course, and like with an architect, ask about process with the references as much as outcome, since again, no one is going to let you talk to a client that hates them. And to be fair, even the best contractors and architects have some clients where the experience has not gone that great. Ask your architect to help you review the proposals. While you need to be the decision maker, contractor proposals can be formatted and priced in various ways, so reviewing them can sometimes seem like you are comparing apples to oranges. Your architect can help you make sense of it, but make sure you've talked about this role with your architect before hiring them so that you are sure it's factored into their fee. Let me step back for a second and talk about the literal proposals themselves. A proposal from an architect may be quite short, despite the fact that they are doing a huge job in designing your new home or part of a home. It's not unheard of that an architect's proposal could literally be one page. It needs to lay out what their services are and what those fees would be, but for an architect that's fairly straightforward and comes in buckets. A design consult, a set of drawings, the permit process, project management, etc. But a good contractor's proposal will be much longer and much more detailed, especially if you have given them good and thorough drawings. It should and will break out the work by type and or by room, like drywall and paint, electric, plumbing, flooring, etc. It will be filled with numbers in a much more detailed way than an architect's. I know this is obvious, but it's because this proposal has your construction budget in it. It's more than just a proposal. Let me repeat that. It has your budget in it. And so it needs to be broken out and have a budget in it. It can't just be vague with buckets the way an architect's proposal should be. It should also always have a contingency. A good contractor's proposal, however, will be much longer and much more detailed, especially if you have given them a good and thorough set of drawings. It should break out the work by type and or by room, i.e. drywall and paint, electric, plumbing, dining room walls, etc. It will be filled with numbers in a much more detailed way than an architect's. I know this sounds obvious, but it's because this proposal has your construction budget in it. It should also always have a contingency line item. Both an architect and contractor will also have a contract for you to sign once you select who you want to work with. Here again, the more detailed the better about roles and responsibilities, timelines, how issues and change orders are dealt with, how and when payments get made, etc. For the contractor, make sure they are giving you a schedule of when decisions will need to be made, or at the very least, a rough schedule and a time frame for an actual schedule, and how things like inspections will be handled. It's totally okay if you want to have a lawyer look at this contract. It has a lot in it, and it's for a lot of money. In every case, please remember that while they have a lot of expertise, you are the client. Do not be afraid to speak up and ask questions of a potential architect, a potential contractor, or a hired architect and hired contractor. This is your home we are talking about, and a lot of your money. And I hope that after listening to this episode, you feel more comfortable and confident about talking to and hiring an architect and contractor. Thanks for listening. See you next time.